Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Analytical Lion. I'm Josh Davis. Thank you all for joining me. It's always tough doing these after a loss. I've done a whole bunch of them, and this one, I've actually been less upset over this game than I thought I would be, considering how big of a game it was, how exciting it was, how good the atmosphere was, how we came back, how we had chances to win, the way we lost. So yeah. I think the reason for that is just it's week 5 and there's still so much football to be played. Penn State is still number 7 in the country, securely in playoff contention. You got bigger games the rest of the year, right? And you got to stay focused on that. In terms of this game, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about some of the other things going around college football that impact this game, and then just where Penn State stands going into the rest of the season, how this game controls their destiny in terms of what they have to do to get where they want to be. Before I jump into the bad stuff and the things that went wrong, I want to start the show off by saying how proud I am of the boys for coming back and forcing OT. The whole team, and especially Drew Allar, showed a lot of resolve and grit, played some really incredible football towards the end of that game. The big issue that I obviously have to talk about is that the first chance that Penn State had the ball to go and win the game, Allar blows it with the interception. We've seen this too many times to be deja vu. This is a legitimate problem, a mental wall that he's been unable to overcome. The last 3 losses now that Penn State have had has been because of a Drew Allar interception on a potential game-winning drive. That's an issue. At the same time, I can look at that and say, that's one thing then that you can pinpoint and say, wow, if we stop throwing interceptions on game-winning drives, we might win games. The issue is now that it's happened 3 times, and twice to Oregon. And I don't see tons of reasoning to believe now that Drew Allar can do that until he does. It's really that simple, because we know he's talented enough. We saw how well he played in that comeback. He's able to put the ball in the end zone when it matters. Except for right there, the very first chance he got with the ball to win the game, that's what happens. And then maybe it's something with the bye weeks, maybe it's, I don't know. But Penn State simply has to start the game better than that offensively. Maybe it's a big game thing, I don't know. Because I do remember in some big games last year, SMU, Illinois, Ohio State, Wisconsin, the defense had to score points to get the offense going. You're not going to get a pick 6 in every game. The offense has to either start the game with a more formidable game plan, or they have to make adjustments quicker. No matter how well the defense is playing, you can't ever go into halftime with 3 points on the board. And I want to say this matters because our biggest game of the year on November 1st at Ohio State, that is off of a bye week as well. So now James Franklin, I believe he's like 7-9 now, straight off bye weeks. That's gotta be fixed. I don't know if it's the routine coming off of a bye week, because as a football team, you are on a very strict routine all throughout the season, and the bye week does mess that up. Things change over that week. I don't know what it is, but this team has got to go into the Ohio State game in a few weeks a lot more ready to go than they were against Oregon. The defense was ready to go. I wasn't worried about them, and they gave me no reason to worry about that. They are locked in from the very first play. And yeah, it's easy when you got a whole crowd of people cheering for you. But the offense looked absolutely inept the first 3 or 4 drives of the game. Had no answer until after halftime. In terms of the adjustments the offense made, it starts with Drew Aller being assertive with his legs. He needs to be assertive with his running ability 100% of the time. It's too easy for defenses when he doesn't have any interest in doing anything but throwing the ball downfield. It also comes down to utilizing the guys who are having success. Devontae Ross played a wonderful game. He came up huge for Penn State in the fourth quarter. Fat Man had some crucial runs to propel the ground game and eat some of the clock on that final drive of regulation. However, there's a gaping void forming where Nick Singleton used to reside in this offense. He's doing awesome in the passing game, and he was second on the team in receiving yards against Oregon. But running between the tackles has been tough for him. Plays that used to be designed for him are now going to Pena and Ross on sweeps. Allen will likely start to see a larger share of carries. Listen, if he's banged up, don't play him for a little bit. We play some easy games coming up, and we have more than enough talent with Cam Wallace and Corey Smith behind him, but Penn State will need the best version of Nick Singleton back and leading the offense by the time they face off against Ohio State. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Oregon, because every question that I had about Oregon going into this game, they answered it with conviction. How would they be able to deal with the toughest atmosphere in sports? Dan Lanning said after the game that he didn't feel like the crowd was very impactful. I can say firsthand that the crowd was one of the loudest crowds I've ever experienced. The fans did their job. The atmosphere was a ton of fun. It was deafening in Beaver Stadium all game long. Yet, the fans' impact wasn't as much as expected. Why? Oregon's preparation was top-notch. I still don't fully understand their silent snap count, but it was innovative, it was extremely effective, and evidenced by their lack of pre-snap mistakes, it worked. That's all that matters. How would they hold up in the trenches? That was one of my other big questions for Oregon. Stopping the run was a major concern going into this game. Katron Allen still had his moments, and Allar was able to find some things late with his legs, but Nick Singleton was held in check for an 11-carry, 21-yard game, only 1.9 yards per rush. On the other side of the ball, Oregon's offensive line allowed 0 sacks. I think it's more of a credit to Will Stein's ability to get the ball out of Dante Moore's hands in a flash, along with Moore's ability to evade pressure, but it still is impressive. Finally, the other big question was, how would Oregon's new guys do? Whether it's youth or transfers, the Ducks' newcomers shined. The freshman De'Aaron Hill was clearly Oregon's best option out of the backfield, as Noah Whittington and Jaden Lamar struggled mightily. Dante Moore made some simply ridiculous plays, fought through overtime, and took some big hits, all while playing essentially mistake-free football. That was really impressive from Dante Moore. I saw somebody had him top on the Heisman odds after his performance, and I can't deny it. He was really special. He was the sole reason why Oregon was able to win that game. Oregon was fortunate that their only turnovers were the turnovers on downs. But it's also a credit to Moore, who didn't put the ball in harm's way. Yeah, you can debate about whether that Noah Whittington fumble was actually a fumble. That was a really big play in the game that took a lot of energy out of the stadium. Obviously, there was the interception in the second overtime on the 2-point conversion that Denai had. That was a really wonderful play that set up the offense to have a potential game-winning drive. But technically, neither of those count as turnovers for the team. So Oregon, I believe, went 5 of 7 on fourth down. They had to go for it 7 times on fourth down. The defense forced them to go for it so often on third and fourth. Third down, they had to go for it 18 times. They were 6 of 18. That's a lot of forcing the other team to make plays in crunch time when it matters. Yes, it was a lot of third and short, fourth and short, but still, those are plays that your defense is setting themselves up for success, and Oregon answered every single time. If you're frustrated with how Jim Knowles called this game because you say, oh, we didn't get any turnovers and we didn't get any sacks, and I was talking about it in last week's show and in my videos how this Penn State's defense has been the best in the country at generating big plays and forcing the other team to make mistakes. Oregon's entire offense was schemed up to not make any mistakes. That's what they revolved their entire game around. And then they said, all right, and we trust our best playmakers, like the Moores, to go make plays and win us this game and just do enough to get it. And that's exactly what happened. And they got some fortunate bounces. The referees really helped them because, and I want to take a couple seconds to talk about this, because it is an issue right now with the Big Ten referees where I don't know if it's because they want to help out the offenses because the offenses were struggling a bit. I mean, it's 3-3 at halftime, so you can't say that the defenses needed more help. But there were maybe half a dozen to a dozen holding calls that should have been called for both sides. And I feel like more of them would have been called on Oregon. Several plays where just clear holding that would have resulted in a sack or a QB pressure that were just not called. And I think that's not just an issue with the refs in this game, it's an issue with the Big Ten refs as a whole, because you see it in several Big Ten games across the country. It is an issue with the way the Big Ten handles its officiating. I don't want to say you go be SEC refs and you call everything, right? But at the same time, it's not football when the offensive linemen are just allowed to do anything they want to keep their quarterback clean. And that obviously helped the team with the worst QB rush, which was obviously Oregon. That was Penn State's big advantage statistically going into this game that I talked about last week, was that Penn State had the far superior QB rush and far superior defensive line in terms of creating havoc, and the refs completely took that out of the game. And yeah, that overturned fumble was huge. There were two fumbles, actually, one of which was an easy recovery in overtime. That could have just ended the game if it bounced over to a Penn State guy instead of back to Moore. And I also want to credit Moore again. He didn't pull a Cam Newton. He went down there and jumped on the ball and sacrificed his body for the game. If he just stands there, Whittington wasn't getting it. So that was a crucial play in overtime that kept Oregon in it. But the other one was completely up in the air and controversial. I understand both sides of it. I don't understand how there was enough evidence to overturn the call on the field. If it was called down on the field, I think it should have been upheld. If it was called a fumble on the field, which it was, I think it should have been upheld. I don't know how you can tell from a camera angle all the way across the field with blurry look, and you're looking at blades of grass, and you can say with conclusive evidence that he was down. And an absolutely crucial play. It goes from gifting Oregon 7 points to what would have been Penn State getting the ball past the 50-yard line. Their best field position of the day. Huge swing, and most importantly, that really took the energy out of the stadium. That was the huge momentum play that Penn State needed, getting a stop towards the goal line. And instead, it was completely flipped on its head. And then Oregon went and scored 2 touchdowns quickly after that. The crowd was deflated, to say the least. And obviously, Penn State figured out how to get back in the game. But that call completely ruined their momentum in that game. And back to Oregon's new guys. DeCorian Moore played as advertised. He led the game in receiving. He didn't completely take over, but keeping in mind his age, he's going to be a force as he gains more experience. On the defensive side of things, transfers Bear Alexander and Dylan Thieneman were crucial for Oregon in this one, showing how necessary it is to be able to use the transfer portal to gain experience. Safety was the one major weak spot for the Ducks last year, and it might have cost them a championship. While Thieneman did get burned on Devontae Ross's long touchdown, he came up clutch when it mattered in double overtime. You could only help but think that Purdue could use a guy like that. And then I want to talk about what this game means for Penn State, right? I could sit here and yap all day about things that Penn State could have done better and issues with the play calling and issues with this and that. In terms of as a whole, if you want to blame somebody, I don't know if there's any one particular person you can blame in this game. It's certainly not James Franklin. I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, Franklin lost another big one, he needs to be fired. That's a really bad take. Not a lot of thought put into that one. I've seen some people blaming Knowles, of all people. He gave up 17 points in regulation to maybe the best offense in the country. Maybe rethink that take. If you want to blame Coach Kotelnicki for scoring 3 points in the first half, that's fine. I'm with that. The offensive game plan certainly could have been better. The offensive line played like crap in the first half. Maybe you could blame them. Nick Singleton couldn't run the ball very much. He still had some sort of impact. Like I say he didn't run the ball much, but some of his runs were like crucial fourth down runs where, yeah, he only got like 2 yards, but he picked up the 2 yards we needed for a first down. So again, I don't think you can blame him for losing the game. Obviously, if you want to blame Drew Aller, I could get behind that, but he's also the guy that got you back into the game, played some ridiculously good football there in the fourth quarter. People saying that you might have won the game with Bo Pribula. I don't know if Bo Pribula is even in that situation, right? I love Bo. I think he's a really good quarterback who's going to do amazing things with Missouri. I don't know if you're even in a tie game in the fourth quarter if you have Bo Pribula. It's tough to say whether he's able to even get there. But I would agree that Bo Pribula has a more winner mentality than Drew Aller. I'm with you there. But yeah, let's talk about what this game means for Penn State, where they're at now for the rest of the season. So here's the thing. If I had to pick any game for us to lose all season long, this is the one I'd pick. Everyone would agree you'd rather beat number 1 Ohio State in Columbus. That would be a bigger win. You'd rather beat Indiana because losing to them would be a much worse looking loss. And you'd rather win any potential Big Ten championship or playoff games at the end of the year. Considering the fact that a loss like this helps you identify your weaknesses, losing your first big game isn't the worst thing to happen. If we had to play Oregon later this season in a more meaningful game, I would feel more confident knowing that we have the opportunity to make the proper adjustments. Also, going back to that Indiana game, the Hoosiers are now a top 10 team. They play Oregon in a couple of weeks. All Penn State fans should be rooting for Indiana the rest of the way, obviously, except for when we play them. Because PSU needs another big opportunity to bolster their resume. There's a decently likely scenario now where Penn State loses to Ohio State and beats Indiana, has a 10-2 record in the regular season, going 1-2 in marquee games. Penn State does play Ohio State first, so before Indiana, and then depending on the result of the Indiana-Oregon game, the Hoosiers might still be ranked in the top 10 by then. So Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana all play easy schedules the rest of the way. They each have 2 big games apiece. Ohio State has 3 ranked games left, but Illinois and Michigan are well outside the top 10. The Nittany Lions are the top-ranked team with a loss in the new AP poll, ranked at number 7 in the country. In the 12-team playoff era, there's still tons of opportunity and optimism for Penn State football. Losing a tough game to Oregon might be a blessing in disguise in their quest for a national title. Let's move on to the UCLA game this weekend. Traveling to LA was tough last year when Penn State had to beat USC in overtime. Heading across the country after a loss is even tougher. However, there's nothing tough about UCLA football right now. After a controversial offseason, we can now definitively say that Deshaun Foster messed up. He sent potential Heisman candidate Joey Aguilar to Tennessee in a trade for Nico Iamaleava, who has 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions so far this year. Iamaleava almost has the same number of carries as Katron Allen, and he's been disappointing with his arm. UCLA has the worst offense in the Big Ten, only scoring 14.3 points per game. They're 0-4 with losses to Utah, UNLV, New Mexico, and Northwestern. Their defense is the worst in the Big Ten, too, allowing 402 yards per game. Listen, this is the perfect get-back game for the Nittany Lions, as they try to reset after the loss to Oregon and apply some of the adjustments they've made after watching film. My prediction, PSU 42, 3 for UCLA. This is by far the easiest game left on the schedule. Let's make it count and take care of business. Oh, let me get a quick drink here, and then we'll talk about some of the other stuff going on around college football. Want to quickly talk about this. I didn't get to watch it live, but if you skipped out on Penn State, Oregon to watch the Alabama-Georgia game, I'm sorry for you. You watched the inferior football game. The Bama-Georgia game this past weekend was the new SEC in a nutshell. And I don't want this to sound disrespectful, because it might sound disrespectful, but the SEC is all about speed right now. No defense, no toughness or hard hitting. Both sides riddled with mistakes, whether it's dropping easy balls or committing ridiculous penalties. As a whole, there is a culture issue in the SEC. There's a couple of exceptions, right? But I think the issue is those couple of exceptions aren't the top teams you'd usually expect. Top culture teams right now in the SEC, I'm looking at Vanderbilt, Missouri. Top teams aren't really doing that right now. And I'm talking especially about Bama, Georgia. Maybe you could throw Texas in there as well, because those are the top 3 brands in the SEC right now. And all 3 of those teams are just playing mistake-riddled football. It's not as fun to watch, and it's certainly not going to work in the playoffs when they have to play top teams from the Big Ten. So I'm going to do a playoff contender preview. I already did one before the season started, which it's been hit or miss. Some of my picks are doing really well, some pretty terribly. I'm looking at Baylor, man. I thought they were going to be better. I'm going to do another playoff contender right now after Week 5, another one after Week 10, and then another one after Week 14, heading into the conference title games. So I'm going to do a few of these. This is my one after Week 5. In no particular order, these are the 12 teams that I think will make the playoffs at the end of the season. This is based on how well a team has done so far, and also how well I think they will do the rest of the year. I might predict some teams in the current top 10 to fade and miss the playoffs, and I might predict some teams outside of the top 10 to win some games and move into the playoffs. With that being said, I think there's 2 locks right now for the CFP. Barring a major upset, I think Ohio State and Oregon have clear paths to the playoffs. Obviously, they still play some big games, but if they lose them, I think they'll still be in. Ole Miss, as weird as it sounds, is the highest-ranked SEC team right now after the win over LSU. The Rebels have an easy schedule the rest of the way, and I think even if they lose to Georgia and Oklahoma, a 10-2 Ole Miss team is probably in. Texas A&M already has the win over Notre Dame, and they have a decently easy schedule the rest of the way. If they win one of the LSU, Missouri, or Texas games, they're in. I think Georgia figures it out. I have them beating Ole Miss at home in a few weeks, and they certainly could beat Texas and Georgia Tech later this year. All of their biggest games are at home. I believe they only play 2 games at home two games on the road the rest of the year, and they're both 2 of the worst teams in the SEC. And the early Bama loss might do Georgia some good. It's not the worst thing in the world for them. It's the same thing I was talking about earlier for Penn State. Going back to the Big Ten, I think Penn State has a clear path. Outside of the Ohio State game, they'll be favored in every game for the rest of the season. Do I predict Indiana to make it? An 11-1 Indiana would certainly make it in with a win over Oregon or Penn State, but a 10-2 Indiana would really only have the win over Illinois to brag about. I could see them getting passed up by a 9-3 SEC team. So I'll hold off on the Hoosiers for now. The dark horses in the Big Ten are Illinois and Michigan, who both have one more ranked team on their schedule, number 1 Ohio State. If either Illinois or Michigan goes 11-1 with the win over the Buckeyes, they're obviously in. You could even argue that those teams have a mulligan and that they can go 10-2 with a win over Ohio State and still make it. But for now, though, I'll leave them both out. Oklahoma and Alabama both have tough schedules, but OU is undefeated and Bama has the bad loss to Florida State. I'm going to lean towards the Sooners, and I think the winner of the OU-Bama game on November 15th decides which of these teams makes the playoffs. Also, Oklahoma really needs John Mateer back before the Red River game against Texas in a few weeks. I don't know what they would do without him. Finally, the last team out of the SEC, give me the Missouri Tigers. They play the most physical brand of football in the SEC, have the best rushing attack in the SEC, and have a favorable schedule. Yes, their schedule is getting tougher by the week as some of their teams that they play have been getting better as the season's going on. That still includes Bama, A&M, and Oklahoma. But if they win one of those games and finish 10-2, they're in. When they host Bama in a few weeks on October 11th, Columbia will be rocking. And that'll tell us all we need to know about how much of a contender Missouri really is. In terms of SEC teams getting left out, because they can't all make it, no matter how much Paul Feinbaum wants it, I have Texas, LSU, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt missing out. There's obviously a lot of football left, and any one of those teams could play their way into the postseason tournament. I think Tennessee is probably my most likely of that group, but man, they have a tough schedule. The final four teams in my playoff preview, I have Notre Dame. Their two losses are to the current number 6 and number 3 teams in the country by a combined 4 points in C.J. Carr's first 2 career starts. By the way, Carr has sneakily looked like one of the best QBs in the country, and the Irish have put up 56 points in back-to-back games. Now that USC fell out of the rankings, they don't play a top 25 team the rest of the way. And their toughest opponent, Syracuse, lost their star QB and then just lost to Duke. Listen, Notre Dame's light schedule could help them or hurt them. I think a 10-2 Notre Dame is in the playoffs, but chaos in the Big Ten or SEC could hurt them. This is going to be one of those teams where it's really tough for Marcus Freeman now to control his own destiny. You got to look really good. You can't win these games by a little bit. You got to go out and destroy the teams you're supposed to destroy. Really put out some eye candy for the CFP committee, because you really got to impress them now. It's not, okay, it's the third quarter and we got to put the backups in because we're up by a lot. You really got to go put up some numbers and impress the people in the chairs, because those are the guys that are going to be putting you in the playoffs or not coming the end of the season. The ACC is a mess like always. Miami looks like a clear favorite, but they always find a way to choke a game to somebody. Georgia Tech is undefeated, Virginia looks like a new contender, and Louisville is still hanging around. But I'll stick with the Canes for now. Outside of the Big 12, it's a 4-way race between Texas Tech, Iowa State, BYU, and Arizona State. Texas Tech is the most proven so far, and I think they have a slight edge over the pack. For the group of 5 spot, there isn't a G5 team in the top 25 right now, and it's anybody's guess who'll be up there at the end of the year. I'm still going to lean towards Navy, my preseason pick, as they've looked good and they haven't given me a reason to look elsewhere. They have a 3-game stretch towards the end of the season against Notre Dame, USF, and Memphis, which is tons of opportunity to get some statement wins. So, my picks to make the playoffs in no particular order are Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Georgia, Penn State, Oklahoma, Missouri, Notre Dame, Texas Tech, Miami, and Navy. There's a couple of big games this week. We have Bama Vandy at 3:30, which is nuts that this is a marquee game. If I told you a couple years ago, hey, week 6, 2025, you're going to get excited for that Vandy-Bama game, you'd have gone crazy. The real question going into this one is, can Diego Pavia do it again? Obviously, last year was in Nashville. This year, it's in Bama. Bama might have just upset the dogs of Georgia, but nothing will be more on brand for current Alabama than to losing to Vanderbilt again. Also at 3:30, it's a crucial game in the ACC between Louisville and Virginia. At night, Ohio State hosts Minnesota in a battle of defenses. The shoe is really fun at night. We saw it against Ohio earlier this year. Can't wait for a big game at night in the shoe. The big game at night, though, is back in the ACC. With Miami heading to Tallahassee to take on Florida State, FSU is straight off their disappointing loss to UVA, but a win against the Canes would put them squarely back in contention. Miami was fortunate to beat Notre Dame by a field goal in Week 1. Heading into the Chop House could either be their first loss or be another statement win on their resume. Listen, that's all I got for you guys. 30 minutes college football here on the Analytical Line. As always, I thank you for listening. If you're going to be in LA this weekend for the UCLA game, I wish you the best. That's going to be an absolute blast. It's always fun traveling somewhere special to watch the team. I hope you enjoy the good weather, and that's a fun one. UCLA was, if you remember the UCLA game from last year, super duper physical. Let's see. It was 24-3 in that game last year at the end of the third quarter. And that was a game that Vega Ione was just pancake blocking everybody. So it should be even more so of that this year with UCLA looking so hapless. So it'll be a really fun game to watch. Hopefully the team can get that bounce back win and really get things going as the season heats up. Well, that'll be all. I'm Josh Davis. Thank you all for watching. And as always, go Nittany Lions.